We designed a very specific type of conversation where people can take a reasonable amount of time. The hierarchy gets flattened. Everybody's voice can be heard. And people can really share their fears and feelings in a reasonable amount of time. Clear out. I feel like there's, when I talk about relationships, it gets gunked up, like it's a pipe that gets gunked up. And this allows that gunk to get cleared so that we can, stick closer together. We can go in the same direction. We can get back into alignment.
Hi, everyone. My name is Duncan Autry, and you are listening to Fractal Friends, the podcast where we explore our self-similarity across our diversity. We all have a role to play in the whole, and the purpose of this show is to interview people with interesting perspectives on the world and see what it is that we can learn from each other. In this episode, I talk with Alla Weinberg. Alla is an executive leadership coach at a large tech company here in the San Francisco Bay Area, and her life passion is to fundamentally change how we work by shifting the organizational focus from getting things done at any cost to the creation of cultures that nurture collaborative relationships between people who are showing up with their passions and fears and delightful complexity. Alla is also a colleague of mine. We are partnering on a project to help that dream come true. This episode is our unveiling of that collaboration. Together, we call our business Spoke and Wheel, and we provide services to transform workplace cultures into safe places for humans. We do leadership coaching and team trainings and consultation for workplace culture transformation. You can find out more about our work at spokeandwheel.co. In this conversation, we talk about the problems with the status quo business culture and leadership strategies, and we think about how to create opportunities for that change. We also recognize that change itself is what people are often most afraid of. And so we talk about how to navigate the experiences that humans go through as they face transitions and personal growth and evolution. We talk about a process that we have designed to help teams open up to each other in a safe container. We talk about how organizations are complex systems, and we apply that lens to understanding how they work and how we can transform them. And we arrive at a vision of a future of work where people are thrilled about what they do, and they feel grateful and sustained by the relationships around them as they work. I love this conversation so much. The joy of collaboration and compassion and mutual support while working towards a common cause comes right through, because that's what we are doing with each other. Thank you so much for listening to Fractal Friends. If you enjoy this show, please subscribe to this podcast wherever you're listening to it, and don't hesitate to give it a review. This conversation was recorded in July of 2019, and now please enjoy this conversation with Alla Weinberg. Alla, thank you so much for talking to me today. I'm really excited to share the things we're going to share today.
Thank you for having me.
It's a fun win to meet someone that you are kind of looking at the same things in life, but to have arrived there from a different path.
Yes.
That's what I feel like this relationship. And so I'll just say at the beginning that I know you because we've been working on a project together about calling the spiral way.
Yes.
And it's about how to bring heart-centered conversations to the workplace. And so we'll kind of get there about what that's about. But just first of all, if you just want to introduce yourself and sort of explain who you are and what your work is and what you're passionate about.
Yeah. So my name is Alla Weinberg, and I'm a executive leadership coach, workshop facilitator, and I call myself a culture designer. What I'm really passionate about is shifting the work cultures and people's mindsets from fear to love, specifically at work. And I think that a lot of the management practices that we have now, a lot of the ways that people work together are fear-based. And that actually prevents people from being creative, from being caring towards each other, from being human towards each other. And I think that's really the missing piece at work right now in the current moment.
It's super easy to use, punishment or the importance of getting things done and there's just like there's ways that we can motivate people
that aren't fear-based.
yeah, exactly. And then like I was trying to see if I can find this quote from Lao Tzu. Let's see, maybe it'll take me a second. But you know, I don't know. There's this like idea that like we have this kind of choice between fear and love, and there's a way that there's like these kind of two big motivators in our life. And it's really interesting, you know, I think one of the challenges of fear, even though it can get people to move kind of quickly sometimes, it's not very sustainable, right? And all the times you motivate through fear, that's going to kind of come back to catch up with you someday, right?
And recently, there's been a classification of burnout as an actual, I think it's classified as an actual disease at this point. And burnout in people is a sustained long-term fear. So your cortisol levels in your body, your hormones, cortisol get released when you feel fear. When it's sustained for a long period of time, actually severely affects our physical, mental, and emotional well-being. And this is because of these, and I would say slightly outdated management practices, and that people don't know that there is another way. They really can't conceptualize because it's just been going on for so long that there's a different way to be with each other, to work with each other, to manage differently.
Can you like unpack a little bit about sort of what you see when that happens? Maybe there's like an anecdote or something, but just because there is a way that we oftentimes, whatever the culture is, whatever we're in, kind of the definition of culture is like, this is the way we do things. Exactly. And we don't really ask questions about it because you can't actually see it that well.
Right.
And so sometimes it's hard to sort of make it explicit. And even if it's something that people have experienced a lot and they like kind of know this isn't really working for them, oh God, we do that so much, don't we?
Right.
Like just be in situations like, I don't like this situation.
But this is the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So what are some of the things, what are some of the challenges that you see where people are getting stuck by like using, I guess we're kind of calling it like fear-based leadership, or just, you know, leadership that's, I don't know, there's different kinds of motivation?
I think the biggest challenge is in decision making. So when the people that are actually working with the customers that are on the ground see something that the customer may need, they may not be empowered to provide that because they don't ultimately have that decision-making power. And the boss or the manager or somebody higher up does. And the fact that people on the ground who are the closest to customers for whatever business, you know, that is running, aren't able or to, actually provide what is needed is a fear-based management technique, because there's this fear that they're going to do something wrong or they're going to put the business in danger because they don't, they're not senior enough, or that seniority somehow makes it that you know more. But what's interesting is that the reverse is true. The more senior you become, the more distant you actually are from what's happening for the business on the ground with the customer, like actual contact.
Right.
And so you actually have less information the more senior you become.
Well, it's like, and you actually have less information about what's actually happening, what the actual needs are. But in a certain way, that's also like the way the structure usually is the people at the top are actually getting more information about what the needs are, what the sales goals are, what everyone's getting paid, what the mission is. And there's a way, something that happens often also, as I've observed, is that there's a way as people have more power or they're higher up in the hierarchy, that like controlling information becomes a way of having power, right? Right.
And again, feeling the need to control information is a fear-based behavior in that way. And so another thing that happens that's fear-based is control. So managers require people to be physically in their seat in the workplace, even though a lot of knowledge work can be really done anywhere. But, they want to see you there working. And you have certain performance goals that are usually often arbitrary and don't align with what you as an individual are trying to grow into and how you want to go with your career. And all of those kinds of management practices are, again, fear-based, because they're trying to create predictability and control where there is none.
Right. Right. So it's like the fear from the manager needing to make sure everything's going right. And then that gets transferred onto the employees. Like, I better not do it wrong.
Even that right and wrong thinking, that there is a right way and that there's a wrong way versus there's our way, or the way that we have created together that's unique to us, is, again, a reflection of that fear-based thinking.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And that you'll be punished. So then that's where the punitive aspect comes in. Well, if you don't meet your goals, if you don't perform, you're going to be put on a performance plan. You're going to be punished. Potentially, your job may be in danger. You could get laid off or fired, right? And when people don't feel safe in that way, that their livelihood is not safe, they're not going to take risks. They're not going to be creative. They're going to comply, which is not the same thing as supporting a leader and following.
Right. I've been reading this book by Adrienne Marie Brown called Emergent Strategy. And like, I have a little book group, and one of the ideas is that, and I've also heard this through Margaret Wheatley as well, but this idea that like we need to like distribute, for a system to be resilient, you need to distribute like the choices through the system.
Right.
And what was interesting is we were talking about this, one of the people was like, just kind of started freaking out because she was like, I don't know if I feel safe. I don't know if I can trust. How can I trust other people to be carrying the thing, the mission or the purpose?
Right.
And we were actually talking about a family vacation. Like, what if I distribute like the vacation plans to like the whole family? Like, my teenagers are going to take over and it's going to be a disaster. And it's like, okay, well, it's, and it becomes interesting to think about, what does it take for us to be able to trust the people we're working with? Because what happens is when you do that, if you can distribute this idea like through the system, then the whole system is able to be self-correcting, self-growing, and able to make those kind of on-the-spot decisions, right? So, for example, all of this like employee is like a hypothetical employee that's like front lines with the customer, and in this, either they're like, I have to do this thing exactly this way or I'm not going to be in trouble. And they're realizing, well, this isn't a very human experience. Customer has a bad experience. But if, on the other hand, if they're able to be like, okay, the goal of this organization is to achieve these things. And I know that because I've been sort of deputized as an employee here to sort of do that the best way. Then they can be able to be with a customer and be like, you know what? I bet we can achieve this goal way better by doing it this way. And then all of a sudden, everyone's having a better experience. The goal's being achieved, but that's only if you can like distribute the sort of the control to the people. Right. Yeah.
And so that's a really important point, in that the emergent properties of a system or a group of people, or let's just say a team, can't actually emerge in a fear-based environment, because people will stick to the plan, to the script, and they won't, they're too afraid to be creative or to try different solutions. So a place where, as you mentioned, people distributed power is actually, I think, an example, a very real-life example is Nordstrom. So Nordstrom empowers its customer service people to do right by the customer, whatever that means. They don't give them a script of this is how you have to speak to the customer. They say do right by the customer. And very consistently, they have very high customer satisfaction results, because the employees are empowered and the power is distributed to do that. They don't have to call somebody and say, can I give this person a credit? They just, if they feel like that's the right thing for the customer, they can do that. They have that power to do that.
Wow, right? And that
is it. Like, this is their employee handbook. Do right by the customer.
I love that, because it's a kind of exactly the kind of thing that would be, in a kind of control model, would be just absolutely terrifying, right?
Right.
Like, wow, if I give my employees the ability to give people credit, then they're going to just be...
They're just going to willy-nilly spend our money and put us out of business.
Yeah, exactly.
And the interesting part is the opposite happens.
Totally. Yeah.
And just kind of in your example of the person that was thinking about distributing the vacation plans, and as you were describing it, I could just hear that fear in that description of it's going to be a disaster. If I don't control it, things are going to go wrong. and everybody's going to have a bad time, and there's going to be no food or something like that.
Totally.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And and it could create a situation like, oh my God, we're going to go do something that's like really boring to everyone else, or I don't know. One of my best vacations in my life, it was like 3 of us, and we were traveling around Argentina, and we made a deal that we would all say yes to what anyone proposed. Someone's like, let's go on a horseback ride. And I'm like, okay, I never would have thought of doing that. That sounds cool. If you're excited about it, let's do it. And someone's like, let's go to a drag show. And like, cool, let's go to a drag show. It ended up being an amazing trip. Yeah.
There's magic in spontaneity.
Right.
And this is where I feel like currently in the workplace that there's no air. There's no room for that because of such a command and control approach to management.
Totally. I want to catch this, like, we've talked about this word emergence, and some people who know it, they're like, wow, this is a great word, it means a lot. But maybe in case it's going over people's heads, would you be willing to talk about like some of that talk that you gave? Like there's a video of it, we'll probably send a link to it. But you're using this example of people using these like algorithms to sort of track birds like flying together. And can you talk about emergence and sort of how that applies to the workplace a bit?
Yeah. Sure. In my definition of emergence, and it's a definition that comes from systems thinking theory, emergence is what comes from how, let's just take people, for example, how a group of people relate to each other and something new gets created because of those relationships that could not be created on its own. So if we take a physical example, let's say a bicycle, you can have a bunch of bicycle parts. They're all different. When you put them together into a bicycle, you get an emergent property you can actually get from point A to point B on a bicycle, where any separate of those parts would never be able to do that on their own. But when they start to relate together and work together, something completely new, completely different is able to happen. And my favorite thing that I just think is so beautiful, it's called a murmuration, which is when a flock of birds comes together and they literally do a dance in the sky. And it's amazing to watch them all turn, hundreds of birds turn simultaneously from, left to right, up and down, and in an instant. There is no, signal or communication that they're sending to each other about their turn. There's no leader. That's an emergent property of this flock of birds that when they get together, this beautiful dance gets created. And the way that they're able to relate to each other, the way they're able to sense each other, they know where to go, and they just go in that direction. And people can do that too.
Totally. I mean, and like bringing it back to the Nordstrom's example, right? If you have all these employees in all these department stores all over the country, maybe the world even, and everyone is just following this one policy, do right by the customer, then you get a business that for decades is a leader in clothing and department stores. And my mom is always like, okay, go to Nordstrom's because you could always return things. You could they're so great, and if it doesn't work, and they're able to stay competitive in a market where so much shopping is done online. A lot of retailers are going out of business because, again, the old way of running things doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Totally, and so it becomes this kind of like this bigger system, even like as each little individual is doing it, and it's only because that control got distributed to each individual. Yeah, and these murmurations, I think they found that they were able to replicate it with a computer program, and all they did was just have each of the little bird pixels follow like 3 commands. It was like, try to stay together, don't run into each other, and try to more or less go in the same direction as the people around you, or as the birds around you, or the bird pixels around you, whatever. And that's it. These 3 little commands, and all of a sudden you get this like beautiful, elegant thing. It's amazing. Yeah.
What touches me about that, what you just said is, and that this I think is really true for people, is the command to try to stick together.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's where I think is that missing piece right now. And I understand historically how we got there, around the Industrial Revolution, it really was about scale, and scale requires being able to replicate quickly, being able to do the same thing consistently over and over again. And that was in itself a revolution, to be able to do that at a national or international even level, to produce the same product over and over again at the same quality, that you can distribute worldwide, right? That in itself was not possible before that revolution. So in a lot of ways, that was a really important step forward for, people, for humanity. And a lot of the management practices were based on how can we make things predictable? How can we control it so that it's consistent, so that we can scale, so that we can distribute. Totally makes sense. Not anymore, though, in the current work that we're doing, because in the world we're living in, things are much more unpredictable. Change is much more constant, and there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of volatility. And so trying to apply thinking and practices from an era that was about predictability to one that doesn't have that anymore, it doesn't work.
Right. Yeah, like I'm having kind of one thought, just that there's this, leader of this country that's really obsessed with what is the trade balance around industry, how many, who's exporting or importing, dishwashers and televisions to each other. But the United States is the biggest exporter of services, right? And so that becomes more unpredictable because there's this human value, right? It's not like our job is now just to make things where you just get in the assembly line. The quality is kind of inherent in that ability to be human and adapt to something that's changing super fast. But I'm actually really enjoying this idea of taking this. They were called BOIDS, those little bird pixels. That's a clever acronym for something. But these 3 rules are actually really interesting, right? I mean, if you could just apply those rules into a workplace and be try not to crash into each other. Try to sort of more or less stay in alignment with the team. Try to stay close.
Right.
And that's actually really interesting, because it's wow, what would it be like for us to be closer to each other? What would it be like for us to be in alignment? And what
kind of structures do we need, or less structure do we need to be able to do that and to move swiftly when we see somebody turn?
Totally.
Go in a different direction.
Current goes this way, and all of a sudden, this is great. I those principles are could be.
I didn't even know that we were gonna go there, but there it is.
It's really good.
See, this is emerging even in our conversation.
Totally. Yeah. And I'm actually really loving, because I found this this quote here from Lao Tzu, from the Tao Te Ching. The wicked leader is one who the people despise. The good leader is the one who people revere. The great leader is he who the people say, we did it ourselves.
Oh, yes. I know that quote. I love that.
Yeah, and it's I think it's just useful because you can control people through fear. But then the leader who's able to get people to realize they're doing it themselves. Anyways, that again, it's this emergent distribution of the power to everyone.
And I think leaders nowadays know that this is really where things are headed and where they need to head in order to honestly stay in business and to stay competitive and to have agility in the current climate. And I also believe people don't know how to do that, because for so long, about 50 years or so, this is the old kind of management style has been the way people work. So that's the only way they've been exposed to work.
Yeah.
And so even though they may want something different, they may not know what is even available. And I have a lot of compassion for that, because it's a struggle to be I know there's a different way, but I don't know how to do it, because every way I've worked has been this way.
Right.
So what is available,
Well, so what was it that helped you start noticing that there must be a better way of doing this? Well, okay, we've already acknowledged that people might have the idea that this isn't the right way to do something for a long time. But what was the impetus for you to start exploring the change?
I went through my own leadership development journey, and I took a year-long leadership development program as well. And I think going on a journey to shift myself from fear to love is what helped me realize that there's a different way for us to be together in life, in work, with just relating to other people in general. And then when I went to this program and I went back to work, and I literally started to feel the incongruency very acutely, literally like a pain, like a physical pain in my body. That's how acutely I started to feel it. And I was like, oh my gosh, there has to be a different way. How do I do this? Where do I find it? And I actually went on a search. I went to find it. I went to training. I trained with Brene Brown. I trained with the Arbinger Institute, which has a beautiful book called The Anatomy of Peace, where they talk about seeing each other as people. I literally just went on a training spree and try to find what is that way. And what's interesting is, although everybody has an approach to it, it wasn't practical enough to take back and be like, okay, I know what I will do different today.
Mm-hmm.
And so I got to the point where I was like, I think these are all interesting, but I need to combine them or approach or design it in such a way that is really approachable and doable. And anybody could do it, even if they didn't go on a teaching spree, training spree like I did,
Totally.
for example.
Yeah.
So I was like, I have to design it. So that's where I got to.
That's so great. And then you reached out through Facebook and you found me.
I did.
And
the magic of social media.
I think it's really amazing. Yeah. But when it's great, because then because I am sitting here being like, wow, I have all these tools that people call soft skills and they don't really think they're that important. And I'm sitting in a world where, I'm doing like mediation and facilitation. And like most of the people that I'm seeing teaching these things are like, it's just like groups of people that are all just like super, it's just squishy, I guess. They're just like, like, cool, well, this tool is really working if people are down for like playing with, like there's the great tools, but then some of the things can be, feels a little kindergartnery, sometimes, we're playing with like crayons and markers and, and it's really amazing, but it's like, it's really tricky. And then we also have some very like hard, like structured, like tools that exist because they're trying to basically replicate or become an alternative to law. Mm-hmm. And, I'm getting myself really frustrated because I'm like, it seems like the world really needs like some of these skills, but no one really thinks that they need them, right? Mm-hmm. And no one really, as doing conflict resolution, which I did for so long, it's like people really only feel like they can come to me once things have really
gotten bad.
And so I'm like, at the same time, I'm making a transition to being like, wow, I really want to work with people who want to figure out how to work together, continue being in relationship, but do that without trying to like brush under the rug the differences of opinion. And also I would say, like, I see a lot of people that are like, cool, we can work together, against these other people, right? And like that the only motivation that keeps them together is that they're against someone else. Mm-hmm. And it's like, okay, well, you're going to have to work with those people eventually, right? If you're in the same system, you're going to have to figure that out. And that's
interesting because in my work, often the biggest complaint that I hear is that department is hard to work with.
Yeah.
So cross-functionally, people have a very difficult time, and yet all of the pieces have to come together, at the end.
Yeah.
And so one of the biggest frustrations constantly that I hear people say is, how do I work cross-functionally? How do I reach across to the other department? How do I break down silos and things like that? Mm-hmm. And again, you can't do it trying the old way, right? Because it becomes that us versus them.
Totally. What were some of the nuggets or the things that you learned during your little leadership binge, and like during like Brene Brown and so forth? Like, what were some of the things that really touched you or inspired you?
I guess the biggest thing for me, and this is a personal learning, is just how I guess, defensive I have been showing up in life because I've been scared of getting hurt. I've been scared of other people's judgments, of not being liked, not being wanted. And I think a lot of people fear what others think of them, right? And so the way I showed up was already assuming that folks will negatively judge me. And so I came prepared and armored, right? And when we as human beings armor up in different ways. I do that defensively. Some people do it through comedy. Some people avoid things. Some people are more confrontational. We all have our own different ways. I stop seeing other people as people. Now I see them as adversaries. I see them as against me in some way. And there's a way that their humanity gets chipped away at. And so through all of this training, it's what really I took away is I'm wearing a certain glasses in the way that I'm perceiving things. And I need to continue to check myself and say, am I looking at people as people or as objects? And if I'm looking at them as objects, then I'm the one that's doing that. And so it's my job to change my story, to take down my armor, and to really soften my heart in a lot of ways and be like, there's a human being in front of me. Mm-hmm. They're not a number. They're not a resource. They're a human being in front of me. They're not an they're not an obstacle to what I'm trying to accomplish. They're not a vehicle to get me somewhere. They're a human being. And a lot of times we'll make, I know I have in the past made decisions not to help somebody or not to share information with somebody because of my fear. And when I see people as people, I'm much more likely to follow the urge to reach out, to stay close, like those three principles, right? To share, to lift them up, because lifting somebody up doesn't mean I don't get mine. It means we all rise. And so I think that's the biggest lesson is and I lose my way literally every single day. I lose my way. And it's just to remember to check in with myself. Hey, how am I looking at this person right now or this team right now? Am I really seeing the people there?
Yeah. There's something that I'm hearing as you're saying this. It feels really powerful. It's like, as you are in the fear of I'm not good enough or I'm not there, and as we put this armor on, in a way you're covering up your own vulnerable humanity.
Yeah.
And so there's a self-dehumanization that's happening there.
Absolutely.
And then it seems like when you realize, well, this is happening, that the way to, the question you keep asking is wow, how can I humanize this person? How can I care for this person? How can I see that they're a regular person and not try to be objectifying them or controlling them or whatever? But then this way you do that is by becoming more human.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There's a way, it's wow, if I want to humanize someone, the way I do that is by letting my heart get through my armor.
Yes.
Right? And it's very interesting that it feels like that there's there's an upward downward spiral thing going on there, right?
Absolutely.
And I don't know, just a thing that helps me understand things that I've been experiencing more. I've been going through my own courageous transition of trying to show up more and stop worrying less about, am I doing it right? Am I perfect yet? I'm not going to be perfect. Oh my gosh, does everyone know? And again, this I feel unworthy. I feel like an imposter. I'm not good enough. That's the thing we're all keeping a secret, but
Absolutely.
Everyone is feeling that.
Literally everyone.
Yeah, literally everyone. And so what's been interesting is I've been sort of okay, I'm just going to let my sort of self, imperfect self, just come through. I don't really care what people say. The reaction is everyone enjoys it, right? And it's inspiring to see someone who's showing up authentically, and they show up more authentically. And it's wow, what were we doing all this time, right? Like, how, like,
Well, we were wasting energy
Yeah.
is actually what we were doing. And this is such a huge part of my thinking around the work that we're doing together, is that just people spend so much time, so much energy on keeping that armor up. And all of that energy could be going to connecting to other people, being creative, coming up with new solutions to whatever is happening, responding to changes, doing work, like actually doing the work. There's just so much energy that gets lost in that protection mechanism. And it's tiring. This is part of burnout. This is exhausting to just keep doing that day to day, every day. And I know for myself, I lost track of myself in doing that.
Right. Yeah.
You know, eventually I had a hard time knowing where I started and where the armor ended. You know, I kind of lost track. And so I know that in the workplace, there's a lot of these discussions. Well, we want to be able to bring our whole self to work. Well, yes, of course. You know, the more you shut down of yourself, the less access you have and less energy you have for the work, for creativity, for all the skills that are actually needed in our current work environment.
Like, I feel like I can really sense like why this is like such a passion project for you, and it helps me sort of understand it for myself too. But it's like, this is a serious situation here. Like, we have a serious...
I really feel it is. Like,
Yeah.
I feel like it's a crisis situation at this
Totally.
point.
Right. I mean, like, the amount of people, the percentage of the population, and the scale of people spending energy trying to protect themselves. I just can, like, even hear this voice where, like, I have to protect myself, or, you know, I can't da-da-da. And it's like, okay, you know, like, I trust that, like, the world is not safe in a lot of ways. And if we just use that as our base assumption, then we're going to make a world that's less and less safe.
Right.
Right. And there's something about the courage to be able to pierce through that. And it was just like also like having a conversation with folks the other day about time. And we were just like, you know, like, what does it mean for us to be this like really short living and permanent little creatures, infinite time thing, this massive universe. And we were remarking on just like how quickly humans have caused so many problems, you know, and that was an interesting one. And then we're also talking about like the urgency of like some of the things we're facing, right? And so there might be a lot of time, but we don't have a lot of time before everything goes south if we don't make changes. I don't know, one of the take homes of that conversation was that it's like that if we lose track of like appreciating this present moment, appreciating like where we are and like that we're alive and that we're doing things, because we can't do that until things are fixed, or we can't do that until we've dealt with all these problems. It's a serious situation. We've got to hurry up. And then whatever it is that you're trying to protect from being destroyed, it gets undermined. I don't know. I'm not sure if this is all like, it feels like this is connected, but it just feels like we're trying to hide our humanity because we don't want it to get hurt, but we don't actually use our humanity because we're suppressing it all the time. That's not sustainable. And
Well, we're seeing how it's not sustainable.
Yeah.
And the impact that it's literally having on our environment.
Right.
And on humanity.
Totally. You know, speaking of that, like one leader person.
That's still an emergent property. It's not a good one, but that's still an emergent property of what's happening.
Totally. Yeah, I mean, there's something about exactly like everyone just sort of like being on the attack of each other, and yeah, it becomes like the destruction's an emergent property too, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, and
So I don't want to say that emergent properties are always positive.
totally.
And that has been the emergent property of, again, taking industrialized thinking and scaling a lot of, you know, the more modern technology without really considering the humanitarian and, you know, social and environmental impact
Right.
of that.
You know, we're afraid of it because we're honestly admitting that like we're not perfect or that we're doing things wrong sometimes, or we make mistakes is hard. But, and then that's part of it too, right? Like just being authentic doesn't also mean that we're also just like shining rainbows all the time. Being authentic also means I was way out of integrity right there. And
People don't feel safe to do that because, again, the practice is then to punish.
Totally.
If you're doing something wrong, the practice is to punish, to put you on a performance plan, to lay you off, to move you to a different position, to demote you, or not give you the promotion, right? And so people are then incentivized not to share those kinds of things because of the punitive system that we grew up with. This is how people parented, all along the way, and this is how people work along the way, and it doesn't work for either any longer.
Totally. So let's talk a little bit about like this challenge that we sort of have crafted for ourselves here, and like what we've been doing with it. So it feels like, so the challenge we have is like, okay, we're trying to create a tool or a space where people can be authentic, even though it's risky. A
safe space. We're trying to create a really safe space.
Exactly. Yeah. And this safe space needs to allow for people to say what they're worried about. It needs to allow for people to, give some kinds of criticism sometimes, and
to disagree.
And we need to do this in a context where everyone's sort of afraid to do any of these things, usually already. We have to do it in such a way that it can run on its own, right? So it can't, everyone's kind of afraid of this because who knows what's going to happen if we start telling the truth, and
exactly.
Yeah, we need to create something that's like simple enough that can be sort of used, even if someone hasn't gone through the heart-opening leadership journey. Yeah, and so
that's a small challenge.
Yeah, it's a small challenge, totally. And it needs to be, and also recognizing that like things are emergent, we recognize that it can't be done just like in a top-down kind of way. It has to be something that can be sort of self-guided and sort of run on its own energy. Yeah, so that's what we've been working on. Do you want to like talk a little bit about sort of like where the spiral way has been going a little bit, or?
Yeah, we just kind of laid out all the challenges that people are currently facing in the workforce, and the biggest challenge is connecting to each other as humans, and really connecting to our shared humanity, our imperfections as human beings. We all are having those really deeper, more touching conversations. And what sparked it for me was reading Brene Brown's Dare to Lead book, her latest book. And there's just one quote in there that says, "You can spend a reasonable amount of time addressing fears and feelings, or an unreasonable amount of time addressing unproductive behavior." And I thought, yes, exactly. How do we do that? Right? And she doesn't go on to say how. She just says, this is a good idea. And I said, yes, this is a good idea. How do we do this? And so when we got together, this is what, I really wanted us to create, is how do people have that dialogue? It is not a regular meeting. You can't have a meeting the way you always have a meeting and expect to get a different result.
Right.
Right. And so what we created is so that anybody could take it, is a very much a step-by-step process of, this is what you do first. This is the question you ask. Then this is what you do next, so that people can really take it, can really run with it, can really lead a really different conversation. And what I actually thought about just coming to this conversation is what we did conversational design. We designed a very specific type of conversation where people can share, where people can take a reasonable amount of time. The hierarchy gets flattened. Everybody's voice can be heard. And people can really share their fears and feelings in a reasonable amount of time and clear out. I feel like there's, when I talk about relationships, it gets gunked up, like it's a pipe that gets gunked up. And
Right.
This allows that gunk to get cleared so that we can, stick closer together. We can go in the same direction. We can get back into alignment. And the way to do that is for people to really be heard, to let people say what they needs to be said without the risk of punishment.
Right.
And in a really step-by-step structured way, so that literally anybody could run this type of conversation.
Hello, Fractal Friends. I hope that you're enjoying this episode, and pardon the interruption. If you are really liking this episode, please subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, and come visit fractalfriends.us to get more information about each show and the guests. You can also sign up for my newsletter there, where I share information not just about the podcast, but also my work as a conflict transformation educator and catalyst. In addition to hosting this podcast, I give talks, teach workshops, give personal coaching, custom trainings for organizations. I work with individuals, companies, and communities that are trying to transform the important and difficult conversations into positive engines for growth. Over the years of working in conflict transformation, I've discovered 3 rules of conflict. 1, it's not about what it's about. 2, those who are involved in the conflict must be involved in the solution. And 3, the process for resolving a conflict is actually the same as the solution. Today I'm going to explain the first rule of conflict. Conflict is usually not about what it's about. People tend to see conflict as a choice between one side's position versus the other's. The truth, however, is that both positions and the idea that they will need to be a single choice are an illusion. The positions people take in a conflict almost always are an attempt to get some other need met. The conflict is not about who takes out the trash, it's about respecting each other's time and contributions. The conflict is not about where the border is, it's about identity and history and access to resources. Transforming a conflict requires discovering what those underlying needs are. And once you can find the feelings and interests hidden beneath what people are asking for, then you can find solutions that work for everyone involved. If you want to learn more about my work and the other rules of conflict, or if you would like to talk about a conflict that you would like to transform, or if you would just like to improve you or your company's skills around conflict, you can visit duncanautry.com. And there you can sign up for a free half-hour consultation. And again, don't forget to sign up for the newsletter. Thank you for listening, and now back to the show. Without the risk of punishment, and then also trying to avoid the risk that all of a sudden it just becomes everyone just like saying all their gripes and, and you smell and I don't like, without it just becoming this, unraveling. Because I think that's probably why people are afraid of these things.
Right.
Like I'm always talking about, in politics, we need to really get better conversations about community conversations, or people can politicians can actually hear from the people who they're working for. And then you look at town hall meetings where people are just yelling at each other and smashing things, and you're like, okay, wait a minute, okay, we definitely can do that better, but you can't just open up a space and just have everyone just talk about everything they're angry about. So
people really only do that because they don't feel heard. So
Right.
they have to continue to feel like they have to continue to elevate their energy, their voice, their actions to be heard, to be seen. And what our process does is it allows everybody to be seen, to be heard in a very tight, sort of controlled. I want to say actually in a very controlled. It's interesting because this conversation is in a controlled way, but it's for the purposes of safety.
Totally.
It's not for the purposes of control.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think that contrast is always so interesting, this dance between freedom and limits.
Yes.
Right. If you give some rules to something, it actually allows for more to happen, as opposed to just you can do anything. And that's kind of that mistake, right, that happens. So, it's if you just told, I always think about the example, if you just gave 20 people a soccer ball and told them, and just put them on a field and say, do something with this. You can do anything you want. It wouldn't be
chaos.
that interesting.
Yeah.
I mean, it would be chaos for a second, and then they get bored, and then they leave. But if you say, okay, here's the thing, no one can touch it with their hands, and you got to get into that goal, and some of you guys are trying to stop the other people from doing it, and all of a sudden everyone's like, oh, I can do this forever.
Right.
Right. Or some people do at least.
Right.
But yeah. And so, so one of the things, so I guess talking about the structure first, actually there's another piece I want to capture here. So one of the things that we do when we work with folk is we make sure that the leader knows what they're getting into. And just in the sense of really helping them be ready to also be vulnerable. And so part of the way we're creating the safe space is getting people who are going to be hosting this or convening or asking people to bring together, and help them talk about what is your story here, and are you willing to be a human in front of your team, and
signal to them that it's okay.
Totally right, because you can say, hey, everyone can say whatever you want, but if you're not willing to do that, and so there's definitely a lot of work, and just the prep work can be really helpful in just helping the leaders and the or the conveners or the hosts make sure that they are willing to also show up. And if there's like a kind of a disagreement, making sure that those leaders actually work together to invite everyone, right? So that it's like, it's not like just the person who you're against is like doing it. So, if two people who kind of already have two different ideas about what's happening are getting the group together, then it allows the group to, feel more welcome.
Yeah. And I guess we found that this is really helpful for the groups that are going through some kind of transition.
Right.
So maybe there's a leadership change, or the group is growing very fast, or maybe there was a loss of membership, or there's a merger, or some event that is really shaking things up. This is the time when people feel ready, open, and available to have discussions about, hey, there's been things that are going on before this change that we want to, address. And this change is allowing us to do that, because we might not want to bring all of that forward into whoever we're going to be as a group next.
Right, exactly. And these changes, because, whatever the leadership might be worried about it, there can be a sense of like, wow, we really need to control things as we go through this change. Or like, let's think about all the possibilities, that one individual can think of, and then and then we're going to make sure we got all those covered, and we'll make the policies so that they really cover and
nobody actually follows any.
Right. And what can happen then is if someone's coming in with like this kind of control or fear-based model, fear because they're afraid, and fear because they're going to pass that fear on to the people, then, and people don't feel like they can speak up, then they'll start going down back channels, or they'll start griping, or they just won't actually do the work, or they won't be part of the change. And so, one way that you can sort of recognize like, hey, wow, we need to have this kind of conversation, is if people are having feelings about something going on in their workplace and they don't feel like there's an outlet for them to talk about their feelings. And we can just assume that any kind of big change in anyone's workplace, which is
people will have feelings.
People have feelings. It's a thing we do.
And people get scared. They're, oftentimes they'll have questions. What's going to happen to me? What's going to happen to this community and the relationships that I've built? Am I safe? What's really going to change? All of these things, people can sit there and literally imagine different scenarios. And a lot of them are worst case scenarios, and so that brings up a lot of fear for folks. And that's where you'll see a lot of unproductive behavior, like gossiping, back channel talk, people quitting, people trying to enroll other people to quit. There's a lot that starts to happen in the background. And what's interesting is leaders, I truly believe this, I think leaders can feel it. Feel that there's a kind of, if you read the room, the tension's rising, right? You'll feel that tension. That's really almost even before that tension gets there, it would be great to address it then, but certainly when that's happening.
Yeah. And
my least favorite word, a phrase in the whole English language is change management. I don't think you can manage change. I really don't believe in that at all, because, the way that traditionally that has been approached is a very controlled step-by-step process. We're gonna top down tell you what's happening, and we're managing it by telling you ahead of time. But that's not the same thing as involving you, co-creating together, hearing you, really addressing your fears and feelings, and moving forward in the way together that I, as a leader by myself, may not have thought of.
Right. Exactly. Right. And so, so then the model has this, so we've been calling it the spiral way, and we were inspired by the work of people who created something called the circle way. And the circle way is, based off of just like very old models that humans have had about having conversations in circles, and they've been developing this for a number of decades.
Yeah.
And I'll definitely put some links in the show notes for this, because I can't remember their names right now. And it's a really great model. And yes, it's funny. I was actually just talking to another colleague about using circle process and like when would it be useful in working with political groups? And, and it's just like, well, anytime that people need to process something, like an event that happened or something that happened in their group, or they need to sort of really get to know each other. And so like the same thing here. And so using a circle process is, basically a place where like every person who's in the circle gets a chance to sort of answer the same question and share their personal experience and for more or less the same amount of time. And this does like all sorts of cool things. It takes out the hierarchy, so there's not everyone's just a human. Another thing it does is, make sure that people who take up a lot of space are only taking up a little bit of space, and people who aren't able to get their voice in sometimes, they can get their voice in because there's space for them. And then, and as the people are sharing, their experience and the circle kind of goes around, people are able to actually really get some time to share, and then everyone's listening, and we're trying to take notes, we're not trying to figure anything out, we're just literally just like hearing each other's experiences. And then we call it the spiral way because of this idea that through different iterations or through different time that we're growing, and so we're like kind of coming back to the same question,
circling back to the circle, coming back to the circle.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. But we're like growing each time we come around. Yeah, yes. Totally.
And I found that to be true in my own personal development and journey that, every couple of years I'm like, oh, I'm back to this, an issue I've been working with, such as my defensiveness. But I'm in a different place with it. I'm not in the same place I was. There's some other piece that now I'm looking at because I've grown and I've come back to it full circle as a different person.
Yeah,
approaching that.
Totally. Yeah, because if you're just coming around to the same thing again and again and you're still having the same answer, that's called being stuck in a loop, right?
Exactly. And just to kind of backtrack a little bit about the circle process, it's literally just people sitting in a circle with no obstruction in between them so they can all see each other.
Yeah.
And every, each person answering the same question, having the same time limit to answer that, really hearing each other, reflecting back to each other what you heard, and really allowing each person to be seen. And it's what I love the most about this, and this is something that people have been doing since people have had fire, right?
Yeah.
We've been sitting around the fire having discussions. American Indians have had councils, a tradition of councils where people come and they sit around in a circle and they have a council about specific topics, and there isn't one person that decides anything. It is a collective wisdom that emerges. This has been alive as long as people have been alive, but we again have industrialized work so much we've lost that piece. And so just bringing back that piece of let's sit around in a circle, let's all hear each other, let's see what emerges from our collective wisdom. Let's really feel each other as human beings. Let's let us ourselves have feelings about that. It's interesting because it feels a little slow during, but a lot gets done and a lot gets unblocked. And then suddenly people are no longer in this defensive mode, in this unsafe mode, and more possibilities for the future begin to open up. More ideas of, oh, I never thought about it this way, but we could do this, or, oh, this is actually what I want. Not what I thought I wanted. This is the thing I actually want.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I love that, because just like the actual space and then just the shape of the design is creating more security. And it's not just because we've flattened the hierarchy, but because we're really calling in this sort of really old ways of being. If you in around a fire, you can sometimes realize wow, this is the oldest human thing. To just sit in a circle and be in that kind of relationship. And it's amazing the power of having to walk into a room and they're chairs are in a circle, what's going on? Because it's immediate shift, and maybe at first feels, well, I feel exposed, but then wait, everyone's exposed, right? And there's something about like, okay, now we all have to be here. There's a university in British Columbia in Vancouver. I think it might be called Simon Fraser University, but they have like a giant hall, like a giant conference center, probably seat hundreds of people, and it's a circle. And it's so cool. So like there's like in the middle, there's sort of an elevated platform, and it has like 12 or 20 chairs that can kind of be in a circle there. And then the whole room is just circles and concentric circles all the way out. And it's amazing because you just like walk in there and you're imagining like if you were coming to like a conference here, or if you were coming to a discussion of hundreds of people, that like the quality of that is just going to immediately shift because you're in a circle space, as opposed to like the person on the stage and we're all in rows and like that person's special and I'm just another. But there's something.
Well, it's less passive because when there's a person on stage and I'm in the audience, then it's just like TV. It's just coming at me. I can passively receive it. I'm not actively engaged in that discussion.
Right.
And my power is sort of given to that person who's speaking because they're supposedly the expert.
Right. Yeah, totally. Yeah, exactly. And, and so, so like that's like one part of the model is then like helping people like be humans together. Right.
And I love your point about this. This creates a qualitatively different conversation. What are the types of conversations we usually have at work? Task-based, what needs to get done, by when, who's going to do it, what's the problem, how do we solve it, what's the quickest way to do that, right? All of those are very like kind of task-oriented, logic-oriented things. All important. I'm not putting that down, but not 100%. What's missing is that conversation about, well, how are we feeling right now?
Yeah.
What are we scared is going to happen? What are we hope? What's our vision for what's next? What is currently working that we want to bring forward? I think a lot of the thinking, again, the fear-based thinking is there is a problem. We're always in search of a problem and how to fix it. If you search for a problem, you will find a problem. I guarantee it.
Yeah.
And I love the work of appreciative inquiry, which is really about what is working. What can we appreciate about things that are already working? How can we amplify things that are working? And if you look for things that are working, you will find that too.
Yeah.
Right. And maybe not search for a problem. Maybe there is no problem.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And like a kind of another way that I was just like thinking about this is like, it also sort of like shifts our relationship to the problem. Sometimes I'll talk about like the purpose of like any kind of conflict resolution or transforming people's experience with a conflict is to shift people from having a face-to-face thing. Because if I'm like in a conflict with you and I'm like looking you in the eyes, you're my problem because you're the obstacle to me getting to whatever's beyond you, and I'm your problem because you're trying to get to whatever's past me. And so we go from this like you're my problem and now it's like us versus there. And then like the process of any kind of mediation or sort of thing is to get us to stand shoulder to shoulder and realize that the problem is here, sort of this third thing
out there in front of both of us that we're looking at together.
Totally. And that we're now like this de facto team that has to deal with this. So if I'm in a conflict with you, if you're in a conflict with anyone, just hear this, people, like that means that you're on a team with that person trying to deal with something, and you either figure out how to work together to deal with that or walk away from it. But those are the only ways you're going to get there. And so what's interesting is because if you think about like the standard model where the person's presenting, like, here's our new transition we're going through, and they're standing up there in front of the thing, it becomes like this leader versus like the employees, and there's like this face to face, like I'm telling you guys this thing, and people ask questions, like, who's this? But when you get into a circle, all of a sudden, like you've centered this like other thing, and now we're all kind of like looking at, and we're all looking at our relationship, right? And it's like, okay. And so you can think about that center as being like the problem, but also can be the vision where you can do whatever you want with it. But now we're all shoulder to shoulder looking at it. And, and that's like somehow it's very like that transition is really powerful too. And so, because the other part of the model is to also separate out what is the challenge and turn it into something that everyone can look at together.
Yeah.
Right. And so we're having our personal experience with it. And then the other part of the model is to sort of like use a model using like polarity thinking to get people to sort of look at the transition and actually physically look at it and be like, okay, what's going on here? Like we had this like old way, it's not really going to keep working forever. We have this new way, but it feels really risky. And then sort of collectively sort of define that experience. And as people do that together, then they're also able to sort of take this challenge off of
Their
shoulders or off of the blame shoulders of like someone was making me do this, or this is the other team that's messing me up. And instead it's like, okay, here we go. Here's the thing. Oh my gosh, now that we've all seen it together, we need to like work on it together. And you know, and it's again, it's like that qualitative shift of like somehow, you know, getting it out of our, I don't know, like allowing ourselves to be subjects and letting the problem be the object.
Right. Beautiful. Yeah. I'd love to make it concrete by talking about a recent facilitation that we did. It was for a social community group locally here in the Bay Area. And it was actually for a subgroup of people of color within a larger community. And we had people sit in a circle, like we were talking about, and really express their experience as being a person of color in this community. And I think this is such a relevant topic now because so many people are thinking about how do we create more diversity and inclusion in our workspaces, in our communities, in our world, right? And you can't do that without addressing the feelings that people of color have around that. I think a lot of times institutions will sort of put on a show of diversity, but not actually address the underlying core hurt that people are feeling around that. And what I loved about our facilitation of that group and that discussion is that we started with the word inclusion in the polarity map, right?
Yeah.
And through a discussion and through people engaging with each other, with their feelings about it, what came out of that is a real desire for belonging. And I don't think we would have gotten there in any traditional conversation.
Right. Absolutely.
And that's what emerged, is not just, oh, you're different and now I guess we'll include you, but that you belong in this community. And that's a really important distinction and conversation that I think a lot of people can have around diversity in their communities, in their workplaces. Is it really about inclusion? And what is it about for these people, this specific population for who we're actually working with or communing with? Maybe it is about belonging, or maybe about something else entirely. But until you have that conversation, you won't know.
Right. And yeah, I mean, I'll like just flag the piece in case anyone's like looking to be like, wait a minute, aren't these two white people who were talking about this? We did talk to the group, and we made sure that they, you know, that everyone understood that. And, you know, I think we both recognize it'd be awesome if there were some awesome people of color who could. And
that's why we want this process to be self-serving, and that people of color can facilitate this moving forward.
We look forward to training more people in this model. Yes. And so. So just flagging that, we recognize the challenge of that. But what was interesting is that, you know, the framing was, okay, we have this old way where, you know, not a lot of diversity in the group. And so the question, you know, brought to us by like the person from the community who was a person of color was like, how can we make this place be more inclusive? And then it was only, and that was like kind of the tension, right? Like, how do we make it more inclusive? But then how does that process not change the culture of this social community that has been crafted so strongly over a decade?
And very intentionally.
Totally. And exactly. And it was only when they were able to sort of be a team looking at it that they're like, wait a minute, who's trying to include us? Like, what if we all just belong here? And like that, again, it's like, but it took everyone, first of all, being able to feel comfortable and vulnerable together, and then to sort of look at the question that they had been dealing with as a community for them to really understand, wait, this maybe isn't totally the right question, or how do we change this question? And
they looked at it in a totally different way, in a completely different way.
And if they were just discussing that on Facebook,
which they tried,
and they might not, who knows where that's going to go? It would take forever for anyone to have done, to have gotten there. And
that was a 2-hour meeting,
yeah.
right? And so that was a reasonable amount of time. Again, giving people a safe space and a clear way to express how they're feeling. And through that expression, through that conversation, being able to access some even deeper core desire, which is that of belonging, that was not accessible until kind of that first surface level was addressed.
Yeah, and what was amazing is that it also allowed for them to actually develop relationships that didn't exist before, because no one had ever really taken the time to really get to know each other. I mean, it's hard to be in an event and to really dive deep, but because it allowed people to really dive deep and be exposed, new relationships are born out of it, and like the whole thing is like woven more tightly now. And I think that like that's kind of like one of the magic things is like, of this model is that we're not trying to say this is how you need to do meetings all the time. There's tons of meetings where you got to figure out a bunch of things and get the spreadsheets out and, look at the PowerPoints and figure out what the plan's going to be and be strategic about it and, get it organized and linear or whatever. Like that's real. And that's, part
we
of
support
business.
that.
Yeah, totally. We support that. And, but by having this shift, then they go back into that other meeting. By having this kind of spiral way experience, they're able to sort of go back and be like, wow, I know that you're another human. I'm allowing myself to be human. I trust that you understand what I think, and I trust that we're on the same page of even what the question is. And so it's like what you've done is you sort of redistributed to the community or to the whole team or the whole group or the whole organization. Oh my gosh, we're all humans here trying to figure out this bigger puzzle of whatever our company does. And so if it's like Nordstrom's, you can just be like, okay, now I can look around and I can trust that all the employees are also trying to take care of the customers too, because I know that's what we're trying to do. And then the whole system shifts. And I think, I don't know, just like any group or organization or system is really just made up of all those tiny little interactions. And so if you can find ways to shift those tiny interactions, you've changed the whole system.
Yeah.
And
that's why I think this kind of, spiral way conversation is so important. Right now, work is so unbalanced in the kinds of conversations we're having. It really is around that tasking, data-driven conversations that don't create connections between people. And again, not saying that it's not important. It's just not the only thing. And so what happens when there is misunderstanding on the data part is people double down on data. Oh, you just didn't understand the data. But what's interesting about that is that's not true. People do understand the data. They just have feelings. And when you address those feelings, everything else will go so much smoother. Like people will be able to get aligned and get on board and again, stand shoulder to shoulder and look at things together. And that's the mistake I think a lot of groups make, communities and workplaces, where they're like, oh, you just need more information or you need more training or you need to understand something differently. And it's not about understanding. It's about hearing how people are feeling.
Yeah.
It's about being heard. And when you clear that gunk out that's between their relationships because of things that haven't been said, then people very quickly, very easily get on the same page. And I found that when groups of people really feel stuck, when they're really stuck, that's when a whole bunch of stuff, emotional content, has not been spoken. If you're feeling stuck as an individual, honestly, also as an individual or as a group, then you haven't said something or haven't looked at an emotional aspect that needs to be spoken about, that needs to be addressed, that needs to be heard, that needs to be processed. Once that is done, it's amazing how fast things will shift and move and start flowing again. I literally, like in my mind, I think of it as a metaphor of, water flowing through a pipe. Right. And that pipe gets gunked up. That's all the feelings and things that are unsaid. And the more that's not addressed, the smaller the pipe gets, inside, and the water can't flow as fast through it. Totally. You clear that out, it starts to flow again. And it can literally get clogged, right? And it can build up, it can back up. It can start coming out sideways. That's when you get unproductive behaviors. And things really being toxic and not going well. And so that's kind of, I think, the goal of our way, and why we think this is a conversation that needs to come back to over and over again. It's like maintenance. It's like brushing your teeth. You have to continue to maintain that flow in that pipe by coming back to it, by making sure things are cleared out, by continuing to reinforce those connections with each other. And then things will move, things will flow very naturally, very quickly. And so in some ways you have to slow down in order to go faster.
Yeah, I love it. And I don't know, I'm like hearing like the language here, and I reminded this podcast that like a friend of mine has started that's called the Healing Feeling Shit Show. And they're making a very direct metaphor between like, look, we all poop and we all have feelings, and if you don't let the feelings come through, you're gonna get sick. And same thing, and that and this metaphor, like it's like a whole series talking about it's really clever. Anyways, I'll make sure there's a link for that too.
I love that.
It's so good. I mean, it's like, because it's like, if you get backed up and
so a lot of times we as groups are constipated.
Yeah, totally. And it's like, and it's also, I mean, it's like, it's the metaphor is awesome because it's also like, it's also something we kind of keep secret. Like, I want to tell you about my feelings or what I do in the bathroom. It's a secret,
Right.
but we also recognize that, we got to let things flow.
Yeah.
That's really important.
What's really funny is that most people will go cry in the bathroom.
Oh, yeah. Oh.
Speaking about the bathroom, right?
Totally. Yeah.
And people will go have feelings in the bathroom.
Oh. You're not going to go to the only private place. Yeah. Well, I want to capture, because, like, tell me about, like, where you see this going. Like, what is your vision of, like, the workplace of the future where we are, like, have data and feelings?
So that's that's it. I really see a really different, much more humanized workplace where the role of leadership is to create safe spaces for people to be human, to feel, and to do the work. Right. So as you become more senior, you're less tactical, right? You do less of the hands-on work, and you actually have less power because you're not as close to the work. Your power lies in creating the space, the environment for the people doing the work to do the best job that they can, to create a trusting environment, to create a safe environment, to create an environment where people feel that they belong and that they matter. And the higher up you go, the more it's your responsibility to oversee that and to make sure that the integrity of that space holds, not to do the work itself. Right. And then the people closer to the work, to the customers, are then empowered. That kind of power is distributed to do the work in the way that they feel is the right choice in that.
Yeah.
And so I feel qualitatively it would be such a different place to work if that was the workplace.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it would feel completely different. People would feel safe. People would have energy that they're no longer spending on politics, on armor, but on providing, working towards the mission of the company, of whatever that purpose is. And so I really see people thriving in that and being able to be fully human at work with each other. And I actually read something on Facebook recently where someone said, when people come to the end of their life, they often think about their loved ones as, I wish I got to spend more time with my loved ones. I hope in the future, when people come to the end of their life, they are grateful that they got to spend time with their loved ones and their coworkers. Nobody currently says, wow, I'm so glad I got to spend time with my coworkers, right? But I want people to be able to say that.
Right.
And I got to know them as people, and we cared about each other, and we spent so much time with these people anyway, right? Yeah. And they helped me grow as a person, and I'm grateful that I got to spend a big part of my life with these people.
Right, and we accomplished so much together.
And we do.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's what I would want. Like, I would want people, hopefully in the future, to come to their end of their life and have gratitude that they got to spend their life with the people that they work with.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, somehow, like, I've thought sometimes work as being like, it's like there's something can be really sacred about it, because it's like, here you are, and you are this like human on a planet, and just like all the other animals, you got to eat and reproduce and survive, but the other thing that we get to do is sort of transform the world around us. And so work is basically like the way in which we transform things, right? And so we get to like interact with this world, do things with it, try to like help other people out. And, you know, also kind of all jobs are a certain way of like, let me do something for other people so that they don't have to do that, and so they can do what they really want to do. And like, and if we can sort of move towards that, it's like really powerful. But it's also, I've also thought a lot about, it's kind of like 3-part definition of what good community is. And it's people who you can have fun with, and it's people you can cry with, and it's people who you can do things with. You have to like create something together. And, you know, it's easy. It's like interesting how like in workplaces, we're like doing things with people, but we don't feel like we can have fun or cry with them. And then we have other places in our life where we have fun with people, and maybe we can cry with them, but we don't really do anything together except for like dance or whatever, you know, like, you know, and it's interesting to sort of feel those things kind of coming together. And, you know, how can we be part of, you know, helping each other sort of thrive? It's just such a beautiful vision. Yeah. Yeah.
And I really believe the first step, and I think there are many steps to follow, but I really believe the first step is to start introducing the Spiral Way, these really wholehearted conversations into the workplace. So we're not only having meetings about tactical things, we're having meetings about how we feel and connecting to each other as humans. Yeah. And that's a regular, normal occurrence.
Totally.
And anybody can facilitate it. You know, anybody can be the leader of that meeting. That leadership can change for that meeting. And people feel comfortable knowing that they can do that. And that's the work that, you know, I hope to do, continue to do with you, is to teach people how to hold these conversations, to have them experience these conversations, and in my you know, wildest dreams, have that become a regular practice, you know, in work environments, and people really see the benefits of it that they can't even imagine yet.
Right.
Those emergent, I always say emergent benefits from it.
Right. Because any great new thing, if this really is as powerful as we believe it is, then people will see the value of it and they're going to want it. And so, if people are out there and they want to like get in touch with us or want to learn more about this, what's the best way for people to find you, or?
The best way is just to LinkedIn, Facebook, or my website, weheartwork.com.
Great. And you can find me at duncanautry.com, and reaching out to either of us. And we'll have we should have our own website. Yeah, we will have a Spiral website someday soon, and as soon as that's up, we'll make sure that it's available through the show notes here. Alla, thank you so much for this. I love talking to you about all of this. Me too. Yeah, pleasure to work with you. Yes. I'm grateful to be able to work with you. I'm very grateful for you as well, and I am sincerely excited and eager for what we can create next together. Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Fractal Friends with Alla Weinberg. You can find more content and links and resources about this and other episodes of Fractal Friends at fractalfriends.us. And while you're there, sign up for the newsletter so you can get updates on new episodes and the rest of my work. specifically, if you want to find out more about how Alla and I can work with your organization to help you create a culture of safety, come on over to spokeandwheel.co. As usual, I'm going to close us out with a song. And while you're listening, take a moment to share this episode with someone, or share it with a lot of people. The song that I want to share with you is Stand With Me, and it's by Sky Isaacs Nelson. Sky is an upcoming guest on Fractal Friends, where we will be talking about the science of synchronicity, so stay tuned. I picked this song because it is such a beautiful description of what mutual support could look like. Imagine what your life would be like if you could ask for and get this kind of support from your coworkers. Let's create that reality together and not settle for anything less. Thank you so much for listening to Fractal Friends, and remember, we all have a role to play in the whole. Have a nice day.
I will not be minimized, shrink my size, or avert my eyes, for that has been already tried, and the less I need, the more I disappear. I depend on you, there's nowhere I can go, I'm counting on you, and I need you to stand for me. Give a thought to what I need. This isn't an emergency, I just need you to take a stand for me. You have found a garden you can go to shut her out, the pain you know. But that leaves me here on my own to face the tyrant that is standing in the door. I believe in you, I've seen your courage shine when it needs to, and I need you to stand for me. Give a thought to what I need. This isn't an emergency, I just need you to take a stand for me. There's a risk you would be taking if you choose my side. Certainty is not what love provides, and I need you to stand for me. Give a thought to what I need. This isn't an emergency, I just need you to take a stand for me, and I need you to stand for me. Give a thought to what I need. Please don't give in quietly, I just need you to take a stand for me.